This is
The
Unwritten.
The Unwritten.
The Unwritten. The Unwritten.
Okay, what's good, everybody? This is Journey Writer, and you joined a Journey Writers call. We are so excited to have you here. My name is Marissa, and today we'll be talking about something real dope. Actually, we'll be talking about adulting and how books have changed for us as we've become adults. But I guess one of the first things I thought about when we were kind of thinking about this episode and what we would do with it, one of the first questions was, how has your view on reading changed since you were younger? Does anybody have a different, like, for me, I think when I was younger, it was more, I don't know, I just was able to read anything, and that has definitely changed. When I was younger, I could read anything, pick up any kind of book, as long as it had romance in it, mysteries or whatever, but now as an adult, that's not my thing. So what about you guys?
Yeah, I agree. Hey guys, it's Kate. So I definitely agree. I think when I was younger, I was definitely more naive to the topics. Like, just like you, Marissa, I was really a sucker for like romance, the teen drama. Just like any type of like falling in love, happily ever after story, definitely caught my attention. And I mean, I would say it's still much like that now, but those like teen, angsty type of, over the top romance readings were definitely, like what I was attracted to when I was younger.
How about you, Susan?
I think for me, when I was younger, I was definitely the same. I'm a sucker for a good romance story, and so when I would pick up a book, I would usually pick up something that had a love story in it, something contemporary. When I was really young, I actually hated reading because I don't know how many schools are like this, but where I went, we had like AR, which I honestly can't remember that. Yeah. And so basically you're kind of forced to read a certain amount. And I think everyone can agree, like when you're forced to do something, you don't want to do it as much. But when I got to college, that's when I really got into like contemporary romance.
Oh, really?
And then as I got older, I've been trying to kind of figure out my taste in genre, but I feel like I would lean more towards like mystery, but I think a touch of romance, like I feel like a love story can really make a story interesting in itself. It doesn't have to be in there, but at least for my interest, I always like a good love story in there, and that hasn't really changed since I would say like my younger adult years.
So funny, Susan mentioned AR testing, and I remember actually I wasn't a big reader when we had to do AR testing. Not just, it wasn't even the fact that, you had to do, so AR testing was like, it was kind of like they were testing to see if you could read at a certain grade level. And I feel like by the time I got into 7th grade, I was reading at like a 5th grade level, but that was just because I wasn't reading. And I hated it. And by the time I was like in high school, I was reading anything and everything possible. But it really messed with, like, it made you feel stupid, like, to not be able to be in certain groups. And at the same time, because I was so romance heavy, there were a lot of things, that you're expected to know. Like, I kind of felt like you were expected to have read Pride and Prejudice already, or having already read Oliver Twist, or you're supposed to know who those writers are. Even Toni Morrison, who I actually didn't really read until I was in college. There were all these expectations that you meet a certain level of reading, and that you have read certain literature, and that will be a part of the literary canon, and that just wasn't for me. So I don't know if me reading at the things I was reading at the time, if they had a bigger purpose for me, other than like being a source of like technique for my personal writing, and kind of giving me a glance into just, I think every reader says this, but like, this just gives me an opportunity to be a part of a different world, Mm-hmm. That's how I really felt. Like, I felt like, I think I always I hate telling the sob story, but I end up telling this story anytime I do interviews at this point. And I had to learn how to back away from this story when I was in graduate school. But when I was really young in 5th grade, we were homeless. And the only thing my mom could do for us was let us listen to audiobooks in her car, in our truck. And I used to listen to the Princess Diaries, the whole series. And it just took me to a whole new place. It took me out of the car, It put me in a whole different state, a whole different environment. And it didn't make me think, oh my gosh, what if I was a princess? But it more just gave me opportunity to look into somebody else's life and not have to necessarily be in mine at that moment. And so for me, that's what books were when I was younger. As an adult now, it's a little different because now it's my career goal, But that makes me think, do you guys, when you guys were reading the books that you're reading, did y'all feel like it had a bigger purpose? Did it have a bigger, what effect did it have on your life, reading those books at that age?
The books that I read, I mean, if I did read when I was really young, it was usually something, I think everyone remembers the treehouse books, the big treehouse where it spins and they go to a new place. The adventure side of it. Because I definitely would say books are a good form of escape. In fact, in college, that's honestly how I got into reading a bit more, was because it was just kind of the thing that helped me to de-stress from everything. Yes. And it's just kind of anything that really piqued my interest, and they all just happen to kind of have a love story in them. But any book that I was recommended was usually recommended by my mom, and then I would just kind of read into it a little bit. I would read, the blurb on the back and everything, and then I'd read the first chapter and the second chapter, and usually once you get a little bit of a way into it, you kind of know, oh yeah, this is definitely something I want to keep reading, or you're this just really isn't my taste. But I think for me, the purpose that it served was definitely just to de-stress, and also to really think about my writing whenever I would read and try to learn from the authors that I read from. And so that's something that I really want to get back into, because that's kind of the purpose I want reading to serve for me now. Because I think it's one of the things they kind of say, the way you learn how to write is by reading or something. So that's something I definitely want to plug into my life now, the same way I did a few years ago.
What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I think for me it was probably a way of escapism. But I mean, I've always loved reading. I still do, and even when I was younger, when I did the AR testing, I really liked it. It was my favorite thing to do. I always reading. I was the complete opposite of y'all. I loved it so much. It was probably my favorite subject, thing to do.
Yeah.
I hated math and I hated science, but I was really big into reading.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Writing. And so I think probably one of the reasons why I liked it, outside of escapism, is just because, I don't know, probably it was because of, I wanted to be like my mom, because she was really heavy into reading, and that's why we, me and my sister, Spike, was, really into reading, too. She bought us books that she thought we would like, and even when we were younger, so it was probably another reason why I read so much. Is because I always saw her reading books, and so she gave us books, and I just was probably kind of fulfilling. I don't know, just trying to be like her. I wasn't like my mom, but even though I still liked it, and I pretty much read almost all of the popular series that you could think of, Genevieve Jones. And here's some unfortunate events and stuff like that. So,
yeah. I remember my parents had to force me to read Genevieve Jones. We're not going to talk about the year they had to force me to read it, but they forced me to read it. It's so interesting because it makes me think about how moms kind of because Susan's mom was a librarian. Mm-hmm. So just how our moms, our parents in general, but especially our mamas, how they played a role in getting us to read. And I don't know why I wasn't so much more into reading until I was probably at the end of elementary school, beginning of middle school, because my grandma raised me taking me to the library. But it was, I can't, there was this huge gap of time where I was like, I'm not reading nothing. And then my mom was like, hey, you gonna read this Junie B. Jones book. And I just fell back into reading very, very slowly and dramatically switched over into YA before I was out of elementary school. Inappropriate. Don't know why I was doing that. But I think I just took on the challenge fairly early. It's kind of interesting how moms play that kind of role. It also kind of makes me think about, too, kind of how my interest may have changed. As I got older, it's so funny when I think about college. My mom was not for me doing creative writing in college. Were y'all mamas into y'all doing creative writing or writing, period?
My mom was. She's the one that found the program.
Oh, okay. Mom was like, she didn't, this is the funny thing. She didn't say she wasn't for me doing it. She ended up, I didn't find out until like a year after I started college that she really had been worried about it. And she was like, I've talked to a few people and I found out that you can do a lot with writing. So I say, go ahead, do this, this, and this. And, I wasn't, when I first started college, I was only majoring in professional writing. And I had decided on my own that I was going to add creative writing. And because that's what I wanted to do from the beginning. And finally, that little push from my mom in terms of, telling me, like, I feel comfortable, made me more sure about going down that career path. But that little push influenced a little bit, like, the way I looked at reading and the way I looked at writing. Suddenly I was kind of like, well, I can't be like, I gotta take this seriously, and I can't just be stuck on one subject, and I can't just be stuck in one, I can't just be thinking about YA books and romance. And so I think that changed me a little bit in terms of, I'm thinking about like how it might have changed for you guys, but it definitely changed for me in college, because suddenly I had to start taking a lot of more things seriously and figuring out what I wanted to do in my life. And with writing. But how did maybe books change for you guys as you got older?
I think for me, probably like once I got older, I kind of started to like understand my interests more. Like I think just part of growing up, you learn like what you like and what you don't like as far as genre goes. And once I started taking more like writing classes, I realized that okay, I do like YA more than I like I don't know, just what I was reading in class. I guess you could say I was just more so focused on YA. And then even now, once I got to grad school, I realized that I don't even just like YA. I've kind of like even matured even more to historical fiction. And I've noticed that with what I watch and they kind of cross like correlate with what I write and what I read. So I think it's like a life learning thing, kind of like what you like and what you don't like as you go up, and what you're accustomed to, what you see around you.
Yeah, I think that was what Susan mentioned in the last episode. Was kind of like that she just goes for the things that she's like interested in now or have relevance to her life in some way.
Yeah, it's kind of. It's like, I'll kind of go into this a little, it's more about writing than it is reading, but I've been wanting to start writing again, and I've had a story in my head for a little bit, and that's just something that I've kind of been sitting on for a little bit, like if I should start doing the outline, and then I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to start writing again, I need to pick up books that kind of pertain to what my story would be about to get an idea of what I should do with it. And I think the interesting part, it doesn't really have anything to do with my life currently. It's more of a what if type of story. Like, oh, I wonder, like, what if this happened? Like, I wonder what that would have looked like. So it would be fiction, but not but kind of like loosely based off of a question of something like, if this in my life had happened, I wonder what that would have looked like.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because I just got to the point where I start asking where I start asking myself questions like that when I write something, or when I think up a scene to write. For the longest time, in college, so in my undergrad, for the longest time, I was thinking, like, as I got serious, and I was like, I want to be an editor. This is really what I want to do. But I also, obviously, professional writing was what was supposed to be helping me with that, and then creative writing was the part that was supposed to be helping me, like, be able to pin with ping, is that the word I want to use? Mm-hmm. Or pin when something was great, when some writing, some technique or something was great, when somebody's style was wonderful. That was what creative writing was supposed to do. And I remember having, like, the hardest time, figuring out which genre I really wanted to jump into. I think what has always come to me easiest is nonfiction. Because nonfiction is not difficult. You're just pulling from yourself, or pulling from your own thoughts, You're not trying to create a whole new personality. You're not trying to create a whole new environment. You're just pulling from yourself. Whereas when it came to fiction, that was so difficult. For some reason, it never hit me to go, hey, what would happen if this happened? Why would this happen? What if this happened? It just it did not come to me like that. And it wasn't until I got into graduate school and I started writing my script. I don't know if I ever told you about the script, but I started writing the script. And as I was writing it, I had two professors. It was what is it called? Independent study. Because there were no script writing classes that I could get into. So I did an independent study, and these two professors were on it. One of them was from the film school, and one of them was from my college that I was in. And I remember one of the professors, she was like, she was kind of laughing as she read it, because she realized I was just pulling for myself at that point to write the script. Like, it was not a nonfiction piece. It's a fiction piece. But I didn't know how to write and say, like, ask myself questions like, what if this had happened? Even if I had said, what if I had drove to California instead of, like, flew the plane over to California? Like, I did not know how to ask myself that and then write from that perspective. That was so tough. But I think in terms of thinking about how that has changed for me, it's all that kind of thinking has changed my perspective in terms of how I approach reading stories now and how I approach writing stories. When I was younger, I couldn't write a story like that and be like, and without it being in some close relation to myself. And I couldn't necessarily read anything without it being like, well, like, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about this book? How do I feel about this perspective? And so that's kind of changed how I pick up a book now. Oh my God, it's changed so much how I pick up a book. Like, I think I told y'all not last week, but the last episode about a particular book I picked up, and I just, like, marked that book up and was being super snobby about it. It's definitely my writing technique, because that's changed. That's also changed how I approach a book. Is really messed up to some degree.
One of the questions we have on here is, who were some of your favorite authors / some of your favorite books when you were a child, and who are they now? Mm-hmm. One of the things, after you had mentioned Junie B. Jones, because you had to read that when you were little, I wasn't a big reader, but I loved audiobooks, and I got into a habit as a kid. I would have, like, different audiobooks on tape from the library, from my mom, from whoever. And I would actually put that cassette tape, if anyone listening knows or remembers what a cassette tape is. It's this thing that basically goes into... Yeah, I feel obligated to say that at this point in my life. It's basically, you put it into a CD player, because some of them had a spot for, like, a cassette tape, and right. It's like a mini VHS or videotape. Anyway, it would play the book, and that's what I would listen to as I fell asleep at night. I would listen to, like, Junie B. Jones, because that's what made me think of it. One of the books that I loved as a kid was, like, Because of Winn-Dixie. And then I also loved A Long Way from Chicago. That's another one that I loved. That was one of the ones that I listened to quite frequently. It was just a very adventurous, fun, no romance book, actually, but it was funny. It was a very funny book, and I liked listening to it as I fell asleep at night. And kind of going to now, I currently really don't read anything, but I do sometimes think about the nostalgia of books like A Long Way from Chicago or Because of Winn-Dixie. And I think maybe I should just kind of go back to reading those sometimes and then just kind of go, because I don't have a specific author now that I'm like, no, this is what I love reading. And now I'm just kind of a little bit more open and not so nitpicky as to who the authors are. I really don't know if I was when I was a kid either, but that's kind of how that's changed for me. What about you guys?
I am nitpicky.
I have so many, like, when I was younger. I mean, automatically I think about, of course, Jenny B. Jones, like Beverly Clearly, the Ramona and Beezus. Yeah. Those type of books. I really like those. Lemony Snicket, of course. What else? Like those books that I read, like, when I was in, like, 5th grade, probably, like, I can't ever remember, like, the authors that wrote them, but, like, they were just, like, I remember it was a black dude, and, like, he had just came out of jail or something, I think. I don't know what the name of the book was. But books like that, I mean, I'm blanking right now, but I've like, read, like, a lot of them.
Even though I did read Jenny B. Jones, and I love Jenny B. Jones, and I love the Magic Tree House series.
The Magic Tree House.
Yeah, I love the Magic Tree House series, and I even remember the one book I actually really loved was the one where they met the Emperor of China.
I remember that one.
Yeah, I love that. I love the art in it, but I think as the most memorable stuff I can recall, stuff I loved when I was younger, was the YA stuff. Like, I loved Meg Cabot, and I loved I adored her for sad. It was so sad. And I kind of jumped around from Meg Cabot to, like, Simone Elcoles, who wrote the Perfect Chemistry series, into, like, Chris Nashley, who's adult fiction. So I jumped around, and Julie Garwood was way before even Chris Nashley. So I had jumped from, like, in the span of maybe from age 10 to 13, I had jumped from, like, YA all the way into adult romance. And I was just kind of juggling those two. But I remember adoring Meg Cabot, adoring Simone Elcoles, loving Chris Nashley. And all of them just for, like, I don't know, do you guys have specific reasons that y'all love those authors?
I loved Kate DiCamillo. She's the author Because of Winn-Dixie. And I think that was the book, because kind of going back to the AR thing, my mom always just kind of knew what to pick if I wasn't interested in something, to pick something that I would be interested in. So, like, she picked Because of Winn-Dixie because it had a dog in it. It had a little girl who loved this dog and, like, their adventures, and it just had such a good storytelling element, and all these people that Opal, the little girl, met. And then her dog, Winn-Dixie, she names it after the grocery store that she finds the dog in, and everything. And that was always a lot of fun for me because it was very adventurous. So I think she definitely had an adventure element into her stories. That just really, it keeps the reader, like, I liked her books, especially as a kid. I think as long as the story keeps moving and it's not stuck in one place, it's something that always captured my imagination as a child.
Yeah, mine too. I think I liked, I kind of like, because I was jumping all around, because I read a lot of genres when I was young. So I just remembered I used to read, what's those one books? Goosebumps. I used to read those.
Oh, really?
R.L. Stine.
Yeah, Goosebumps. And then the other one, Judy Moody. I remember that one. Judy Moody, Goosebumps. Captain Underpants, even. I used to read those.
I think...
the Captain Underpants comic books. I used to read Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Yeah, like I said, I was like all around because I was just like all interested in all the genres, and just because I think like it was like a different aspect to all of them, you know, like those little adventurous times, and then definitely like, you know, as a preteen, you know, it's kind of a weird stage of your life.
Yeah.
And then I think I did the same thing as you, Marissa. I had like the huge jump where I went from like all those like kitty preteen things to like I just like literally jumped to like more of the heavy YA. So I started reading like John Green. John Green, and then I was reading a little bit of Percy Jackson, maybe, and what else? I dabbled a bit into Harry Potter, but then like I fell down I was super into Twilight, Divergent, and The Maze Runner, Hunger Games, and all of those. Yes, I read all of them. And it's like I'm just like I recently went to my mom's house and I got like all my collection, all my books from them, and it's hilarious. Like when you just like can go down and just like remember what you read. So
yeah, I think that makes me think. So I can remember people reading those books. So like a lot of what Kate said, like Captain Underpants, Judy Moody. I can remember people reading those books and me not like. It was literally there was this time period where I refused to pick up a book. And I can remember other people being so excited to read those books. And then, like, I just skipped all those years and, like, immediately jumped into, like, YA and feeling like, well, I don't know. I just felt like it was a challenge. You know, if it was a challenge, that was good. Like, if I can read Judy B. Jones, then I can definitely read this 300-page book with no pictures in it. And so I would go into reading these thick books. And I remember I read The Host, all 600 pages of The Host when I was in high school, and I read that all in one day. It was a school day too. I don't know what I did learn that day, but I did finish it. But I think for me, I even read Ellen Hopkins, so I jumped around quite a bit too. Don't know how I made it through Ellen Hopkins books. I don't know how I made it through 2 Ellen Hopkins books, because I don't know if y'all read Ellen Hopkins, but she's got some tough stuff she be talking about. Really twisted stuff, and I really liked her. But I think what keywords that could like describe the books that I loved and why I loved those authors like Meg Cabot and Kristen Ashley, Simone Okoles, was that it evoked emotions for me that were not necessarily angst, but it kind of made me wonder why. I think that was. Why is that happening? What is going on? And I can remember too, Simone Okoles kind of challenged a perspective that I just kind of grew up having, this like respect for interracial relationships that I can't really quite explain even now, but it was just it asked a lot of questions for me. Why do people treat people like that? Do people still act that way? That sort of stuff. So if the book made me ask questions about people and why they function the way they function and why they think the way they think, I loved it. And it didn't, like I said, didn't necessarily have that angst. I didn't read any of the dystopian books, and so I'm going back and trying to read those. But I was definitely heavy into the contemporary, contemporary like teen romance and self-growth, and definitely slice of life. Like just normal people just asking regular everyday questions for themselves. I was totally into that as a kid.
Would I guess?
Yeah, I was like that opposite.
Oh.
Yeah, it's crazy because like that was like my jam, like dystopian, that isolation. Like the main characters like isolated. They're all like the gifted one by themselves alone. I feel like that's what really spoke to me, just because I was always alone, and I could like relate to it and stuff like that. And now I'm kind of like flipped, and now kind of like I'm so like not even really into that anymore, to be honest.
Oh, wow. You were going to say something, Susan. What were we going to say?
Oh, I was going to ask, because you're kind of getting into the next question. And that was just like, how do the books you read affect your views and perspectives on your life and decisions? So I was going to kind of ask, just based on what you're saying, Marissa, how kind of has that shaped you as a person?
I think I was almost getting into that earlier when I was talking about my writing style. I guess, like I said earlier, I'm nitpicky now, right? And I'm very literary snobby, for one thing. And now, now as an adult, as a kid, there are these questions you have, but they're very very naive questions that you think need to be answered immediately. You know, like what kind of, as a girl, what kind of man am I going to end up with? Or if you're not into guys, like what kind of person, what kind of partner am I going to end up with? You don't worry about what kind of job you're going to have or, you know, what kind of person you're going to be. You know, as an adult, though they're still asking important questions as teens, but as an adult, those questions have become amplified for me. And so now when I look for things that I want to read and the things I want to write about, it's like more intense. And I think I kind of had this issue when I was in my sophomore year of undergraduate, where I kind of had this period, this whole semester where I was having these anxiety attacks and thinking about the kind of woman I was going to become. Like, who am I going to, what's my identity going to be? Who am I going to model myself after? Am I going to model myself after anybody? Or any of the books, and none of the books or any of the things I was reading at the time was helping me figure that out. I was really just going through the motions. And so now that I've had the time to reflect back on the stuff I used to read, and I think about the stuff I used to read, like Kristen Ashley is one of those people that I go back to quite frequently now, and mostly for technique, and mostly a great amount of time just to get past the time by. But now when I read her stuff and I think about the men that are in her books, I realize that I could never be the female lead in a Kristen Ashley book. I can never deal with the men she writes about. And that has changed the type of books that I want to read now, like the kind of male leads I want to see in a book, the kind of female leads I want to see in a book, how I want them to approach each other, how I want them to feel about each other, you know, that sort of thing, which in the long run affects how I write, but also affects the books that I choose.
So I guess what writer has had the greatest impact on your entire book life, like just in regards to reading and writing?
I want to say that I think it'd be goofy to say Kristen Ashley, but I don't know, because I don't just take from one author, right? So like Ellen Hopkins, I loved. Now I'm just not realizing this, but Ellen Hopkins, because her books were basically in poetry form, but she would usually like take a poem, or it's a whole narrative. It's all prose, it's all one big narrative. But she would take the words and rearrange them into an image, or, you know, just her style of approaching things affects how I write even creative nonfiction. How I add text messages into my nonfiction, or how I add emails in there, or how I change the font sizes and that sort of thing to emphasize sounds and that sort of thing. Ellen Hopkins can be, you know, one person I say this deeply influenced my writing. But on the other hand, Kristen Ashley influences my writing because of how contemporary she is in terms of pulling people directly into the space that she's in, or directly into the space the characters are in. So when you're reading her stuff, you feel like you're in Colorado. You feel like you're in a restaurant in the middle of Colorado, and you know exactly what restaurant it is. You know what street it is. It's a real place. She's using real places to tell the story. And so I try to make my writing just as, you know, just as real. Yeah, I can talk about McDonald's. I can talk about Walmart in my writing, or talk about a pop star in my writing that's real and not feel funny about it. So it just, I pulled from a lot of different people. I don't know about you guys. But that also influences who I pick up to read. If they are that kind of writer that makes me feel like I am completely sitting in 2021 or 2023, like, that's the kind of stuff I really like to take on. Not that I hate historical romance or historical anything. I really do adore historical. But if it can make me feel like I'm in the place at that moment, it's really cool. And like, which writer had the most influence on your reading choices and your writing style?
That's a good question. Right now, so I've been really studying since my book is illustrated narratives about this 17-year-old girl, and her friends are like trying to solve the mystery of her mom's death or whatever, but it's kind of like intertwined with the antebellum South in 1880. So I've been reading a lot from this professor called Dr. Gerald Horn. He's this African American study university professor, and I've been listening to a lot of his lectures, and I just read his recent book about, what is it called? I gotta look it up really quick, because I read it and I was just like so moved by it, and it was so interesting because it was just basically about how slavery was kind of like very impactful, and kind of like how it started the American Revolution and how the United States was formed and stuff like that. And so it was called the Counter Revolution of 1776. And it's not just a war, so it was, it's nice just to read those facts, but also it's just kind of nice to take that kind of information into play when I write this story.
Okay.
I don't want to like be, I guess, like wrong or whatever, or not factually true.
Fact checking,
fact checking. So that's mainly what I'm doing as part of my research. But I definitely think he has been very influential on what I write and how I read and how I think about things. And I don't know, another life I would have been a history professor or a history major just because I like history so much now. But yeah, right now I would say he's been a huge impact on my writing career right now. But and as far as like YA goes, I really, of course, I always like Tommy Adeyemi. I often always say that her last name wrong.
Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy Adeyemi.
Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy. Yeah, she's like my favorite author right now as far as like YA goes.
What is she?
She wrote Children of Blood and Bone.
Ah, yes. Girl. Yeah. I kept hearing. I was spelling that with an H.
Yeah, see, I always spell her name wrong.
Yeah, Adeyemi. Yes, she's really sweet. I've talked to her before. She's very sweet.
Yeah, I really like her books or whatever. So, like, as far as YA, like, just, like, tying all of it together. So, like, taking that path plus the YA and, like, even just doing, like, some more research just to, like, make sure it's, like, up to date and stuff like that. And I'm also reading, like, a little bit of YA. I mean, anime, too. I've been doing a lot of stuff. I've been drawing anime, and so now the book that I'm writing is going to be like an illustrative narrative type story.
That's so dope, Kay.
Yeah, so it's going to like all be connected. But yeah, just like I think because of my writing, that's like what's really influencing right now. So it's like a kind of mixture of YA, manga stories, and historical fiction. So yeah.
That's so dope.
That's really cool. Mine, gosh, my follow-up to that is so boring, because I think for me right now, because I haven't had a chance to write in so long, except for when I was a journalist, and all of that was strictly news stuff. And like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I assisted in an investigative piece, and I've assisted, and I've done stories about things going on in the community and then crimes going on. So I think for me, there was a period of time where stories by retired or former journalists have influenced me, but now that I'm kind of out of that area, and I'm just in kind of like a regular everyday job and wanting to get back into the creativity of writing and utilizing my skills there and the book that I have in mind, I really want to start finding the contemporary like romance, but also I want to dig into mystery writing, because as much as I do enjoy reading, I'm a big movie and TV show buff. And so I definitely think that movies and TV shows can influence my writing and reading styles and preference. Like, I'll use this as an example. I've been recently watching the show Reacher, and like, I'm sure everyone knows like the movies with Tom Cruise and everything, but this is this is kind of like a spin-off series that's still based on the books. And so, and I haven't read the books, but I'm thinking that that's something where I can start was, you know, by reading them and watching the show and really kind of getting a heavy influence of mystery and crime and everything to really work on. And I think that's kind of where my area of what I'm focusing on and what's influenced me right now is it's kind of two opposite ends of each other, which is like you have your mystery and your crime, and then you have contemporary romance. But somehow meshing them together would be really, really great.
I think something Susan said triggered a thought about, you know, being so influenced by the things you watch. I think if there's anything, I can say this now in terms of thinking about like how my interests have changed and like how my perspective has changed. The things I have watched from the time I was in like my last year of high school to now definitely most certainly influenced everything I write. Like, because I watch so much Asian TV, or like mostly Asian TV, but also now I watch Turkish TV and all sorts of things. But because I watched all these different cultures and like how they think, and you suddenly get into how other people across the world think, how they approach different situations. And I was telling my dad this the other day, that as a Black woman, it's kind of interesting because as a Black person, we're taught and we're raised to think about ourselves so much as being Black. And sometimes to the point where we have to make a decision. We have to make a decision about whether our Blackness decides things for us. Because I'm Black, I do this sort of thing. Because I'm Black, I only do this sort of thing. And me being immersed in like all these other cultures just through TV alone, just through movies and television shows alone, have given me a whole different perspective on just the life decisions I make. So of course then it'll influence the kind of things I read and the kind of things I write about. And as I was talking earlier, I thought about one particular show, thinking about like the kind of like adult questions I have now. There's this one particular show from China called The Rational Life that I absolutely, like, 10 out of 10, absolutely adore. Brought me to tears, all sorts of stuff. I was so emotional. But it was just so well written. Like, it was just so well put together, thinking about 3 different couples and how they rationalize their relationships and go against the grain of living in Shanghai, China. And I just, now as an adult, I think, wow, that really, like that kind of stuff really changes how I approach a story and how to approach personal decisions. And influence the kind of books I pick up. Now it's actually kind of hard to find books that I really want to read. And I don't have any authors that I'm like, yes, I love this author. I don't have any of those anymore. That I can say there are new authors. I'm trying. I am trying. I hope people know I'm trying. I'm trying to get into a lot of different people, but it's really tough right now because the writing style is very different nowadays.
Well, that about wraps it up for our episode today. So, any closing remarks?
I guess I think it's important now that you think about, in terms of, we talked about reading slumps last time, so it's really important now to start thinking about what is changing for you, what has changed for you, and what makes it easier for you to pick up a book, especially as an adult now. And if you're a kid, what makes you pick up a book now? Like, what is it that you like, and what kind of books are you picking up? I think that it always helps in terms of getting out of reading slump, but also just helps in terms of figuring out what you're going to read next if you're not in a reading slump.
Yeah, and I agree. And I would also say I really like how I feel like a lot of the things that we do now to like entice reading is we've been, like having more challenges. Like reading challenges, like try to read, like 20 books in a month or something like that. So I definitely encourage that, have a challenge with a friend, maybe join a book club or
Definitely.
something, to keep your reading going.
Yeah, especially as an adult. Because, man, do you have time to read right now? But, yeah, that's a sign off for me then.
Okay, well, I think, honestly, I just agree with both of you. I think it's just focusing on the topics and the things that you enjoy that when it comes to reading and writing and just focusing on those things and they happen to stretch and move to another topic, then that's good too.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Unwritten, your ultimate destination for all things editing. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the art of shaping stories through the magic of writing. If you want to keep up with the community, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Until we meet again, fellow writers, keep pushing boundaries, refining your craft, and uncovering the untold tales that lie within your story.